Hi guys, Ghost Peppa here. So for our next deck breakdown video, we're going to do what you guys have been seeing in the past week or two, Darklords Despia. So Darklords Despia is a deck that I used to play back in the day as strictly a Darklords variant, which is always fun, but it didn't have a lot of support. But now that the Despia engine exists in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it actually has some really unique ways that it can cross over. Now, some people play it as well with Albaz and with the branded line, but since I do also play a branded deck, I prefer to keep them separate because I like to play around with some of the targeting and the fairy builds that I can get out of it. So, for this deck list, we run 2 Despian Tragedies. So, 1 Despian Tragedy is a good card to banish off of Allure, to send with our Foolish Burial, or to send with our Gold Sarcophagus, each of those at 1, and then the Allure at 2. So when it gets banished or sent to the graveyard, it allows you to search out a Despian monster from the deck to the hand. And of course, usually you're going to be using this to search a Luber, which we have 2 of. But you could also fit your hand with Dramaturge, which is another one of, or with Ad Libitum, which is another one of. So it allows you some versatility to get some search power, and then on the other hand, if you banish it, of course you get the +1 of searching and then drawing, which is nice to always essentially +3 off of dropping 2 cards, which is phenomenal. But if it gets sent to the grave with, say, Foolish Burial, then at a later point in the duel, you can actually banish it to set a branded spell or trap from the graveyard to the field. So this is actually really key, and you've probably seen it in some of my videos, if they blow up my field spell. Now, of course, I do run 3 copies of the field spell, which is Despia, Theater of the Branded, but if it gets popped, it may not be super easy for me to get it back in hand. So if I have Tragedy in the grave, I can banish Tragedy, set this back to the field, and I have another theater. Also, if I don't need that, I can also banish it to set Branded Banishment to the field, which is essentially an in-archetype searchable super poly. Now keep in mind it can be responded to, but it's a super poly nonetheless, and if your board is empty, you can still activate it as long as a Despian monster or a fusion is in your graveyard. So let's continue with explaining some of these. So I'll start with the Despian line. Obviously, I went through Tragedy. Aluber is just your very generic level 4. Normal or special summon, add a branded spell or trap from the deck to the hand. Pretty great. It also has a grave effect, which is if a fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle, and this card's in the grave, you can target 1 card. Now, keep in mind it does target 1 effect monster that your opponent controls, special summon this card, and if you do, negate the opponent's or the targeted monster's effects until the end of this turn. So, yes, that can help, but keep in mind too, there is a lot of grave recursion in a Darklords deck, and if you do that, you can only use 1 of Aluber Jester of Despia's effects per turn. So if I revive it and get the targeted negate, I will not be able to search until a turn passes. So keep that in mind and play wisely around that. Dramaturge is just, if it's used for a fusion material, once per turn, it summons onto the field. It's a 3k body. All of these are fairies. But if your opponent fusion, synchro, exes, or link summons a monster, and it could be just special summons, so they could res it from grave, I can target 1 effect monster on the field. It doesn't have to be that monster. Okay, it could be any of them. Negate its effects. Now keep in mind, when you're activating this effect, if you target something and it has a quick effect, like I'm just going to use Caritas for example, during the main phase, quick effect, you can change the attack. In response to you attempting to negate, you can chain, they can chain a quick effect onto it. So just be wise what you target negate. So obviously that would be something to keep in mind. On cards that do not have that, okay, like Hope Harbinger, it is a quick effect, but it's on a spell card or a spell effect that's activated on the field. So they're not going to be able to chain to your activation of Dramaturge, so you can negate cards like this. Just keep in mind that if they have a card that quick effect adds cards or pluses or has some type of effect that will get off, you will not be able to stop it with Dramaturge. So it's very situational. Ad libitum is our recycler in the deck. So one, if it's in the grave and you summon it or you summon it from hand or wherever, it has an effect that you can make all monsters currently on the field gain attack equal to their own level times 100. This is actually pretty funny, and you can do some hefty damage because with first Darklord being a level 12, you can buff it up 1200 attack points and make it 5200 on top of its already insane stats. So that's fun, but also the recursion part of it is, if Ad libitum of Despia is used as fusion material, you can target a Despian card or a level 8 or higher fusion monster that is banished. Okay, you can do it from grave too, but one that's banished, and special summon it. So this basically allows you to recycle through cards that have been banished and are out of play and get them back in play. So it's definitely a good fun tech to have. Alright, and now outside of that, let's go to the Darklord engine. So we run one Darklord Morningstar. So Darklord Morningstar is one of the oldest Darklord cards. It cannot be special summoned, so you're always going to be using it for a fusion summon or tribute summoning in very rare occasion. So if it's tribute summoned, you can special summon Darklord monsters from your hand or deck up to the number of effect monsters your opponent controls, okay? And if you control another Darklord, so if you already, say, had one on the field or something, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. So it's sort of alluding to some of the first Darklord effects, which obviously is inspired on Darklord Morningstar. Once per turn, you can send cards from the top of your deck to the grave, up to equal to the number of Darklord monsters on the field, and if you do, gain 500 life points for each Darklord card sent to the graveyard. So this effect isn't as important to us because we're running essentially about a 50-50 Darklord to non-Darklord build, but it can help fill your grave with some spells and effects to get some interaction off at a later point. But like I said, you will rarely tribute summon it, but it does happen. Most likely you'll be using it for a fusion summon. So if you use it as material, okay, for the first Darklord, here you can see, if it is fusion summon using Darklord Morningstar, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. So say they have a full board, you can completely board wipe them on entry if you use Darklord Morningstar. Which this actually just happened in one of the latest videos. You guys saw me completely board wipe a tier player by summoning the first Darklord using Morningstar. Now, the second one in the Darklord archetype that I use is a 3 of, which is Ixchel. And so Ixchel is, you can discard this card and one Darklord, and then draw 2 cards. So it's essentially an archetype draw spell that also fills the grave with Darklords. Darklords are huge numbers like level 10, level 11, level 9, etc. So they're not something that you're just easily going to summon to the field in most cases. You're going to be special summoning them using various means. Darklord Tezcatlipoca is essentially like a Darklord hand trap. So usually what I'll try to do is search this one out and have it in hand. So when I have my Darklords on the field, they're protected from targeting thanks to the first Darklord, which protects all fairy monsters from being targeted, but they could still try to wipe you with something like Regeki. And so by me searching out this Darklord card to the hand, I can discard it to prevent destruction by card effect. So it allows me to play around that. Now we already went through the Despian line, so then we have Darklord Nergal, okay, which is level 8. So if your fairy monster, which is all of them, attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage. So this is a fun one that lets you do piercing damage if, say, you have a huge they have a huge defensive board. Also, a lot of them have this pay 1,000 life points, target a Darklord spell or trap in your graveyard, apply the effect, shuffle the target into the deck. And of course, you can only use this once per turn on most of these. But Nergal has that, Ixchel has that, and also Tezcatlipoca has that. So all 3 of those have that capability, which is very common in the Darklord lineup. So next we have Superbia. Okay, so Superbia, its effect is when it is special summoned from the graveyard, target a fairy type monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So 2 things need to be said about that. 1, this is any fairy. That means that I can summon any of my Despians, which are also fairies. I can summon any of my Dark Lords. Whatever I need to get a quick effect off, I can do it. Now, keep in mind though, this effect can miss timing and will if you're not used to it. This needs to be activated, like whatever chain that Superbia is coming off of, it needs to be responding to chain link 1. So for example, if I'm going to summon Superbia using Contact or using the first Dark Lords, pay 1,000 to revive a fairy monster, that effect, whether it be this or this, has to be chain link 1. If it is chain link 1 or anything above, chain link 2 or anything above chain link 1, it will fog, and you will only have Superbia hit the field because it will miss timing. Keep that in mind, very important. I run one Archlord Christia, which this one can special summon itself if you have 4 fairies in the graveyard. You can just special summon it. And if it is summoned this way, target a fairy in your graveyard, add that to the hand. So it can sort of let you get things back, like a Luber if you needed it. But its key thing is it does not let either player special summon monsters. So this is a double-edged sword. And a deck built on special summoning, this shuts your entire deck off. But say you have a huge Dark Lord board built up, all this wonderful response and everything, but then you still have a Dark Lord summon. So if you leave one spot open and you happen to send Christia to grave, you can just res Christia. You don't need to summon anymore and lock them out. It is a very mean card, I know. Dark Lords is a weaker archetype, so I'm a little more okay with running it in that. Also, especially in the tier format, this will dead stop tier. So it's a good card to run as a one-of. Inside the Dark Lord line, we also have Indulged Dark Lord, which is a level 4, and we have Ukobak, which is a level 3. So Indulged, if it is normal or special summoned, they all have this normal or special summon clause. I can take 2 Dark Lord monsters from my hand or deck with different levels, special summon one to your opponent's field. So when I do this, usually I will special summon Ukobak to the opponent's field because I don't need to chain its effect now, but I would like it in grave so I can start sending traps like the Dark Lord Rebellion to grave. So I will usually summon this to their field. It's also weak, so it's not like they're going to do much, and it's a level 3, so it's very awkward. And when I do that, I will add to hand. This is where I will usually search Tezcatlipoca if I don't have that card on hand. So this is one way I can build my board up during my opponent's turn to have more responses. And outside of the monsters, now that we've done that, I already mentioned Foolish Burial. Send any Dark Lord to the grave if I need it. I can send Tragedy to grave to get my search, etc. Reasoning is good in Dark Lords because while they are all high level, most of them are different. You see, we have 10, 11, 9, 8, 8, 8, 8. So there's a lot of 8s and 4, 4, 3, 1. There's just such a huge spread of levels that Reasoning, I run it at 1, but it's very likely for you to excavate a monster that can be normal summoned or set. And when you do, the others go to grave, so it's good unless you, for say, just had terrible luck and you mill some of your power spells that you don't want in grave. Gold Sark, you're always going to be sending Tragedy on this in most cases to get your extra search off. Allure, if you doubled up on some of these, you can banish it to draw 2 to refresh your hand, or of course, Tragedy. Banishment of the Dark Lord, run as a 3 of. It lets me search any Dark Lord card from deck to hand. This includes the spells, so I don't have to search for a monster, I can also search for the spell, or I can search for the trap that I run. Then we have Dark Lord Contact, which is special summon a Dark Lord from the graveyard in defense, so this is a revival. There are tons of ways you can play with this. You can do summon Superbia, then Superbia chain effect to summon Ixchel, and then you can use Ixchel to chain Dark Lord Contact by paying 1,000 life points, special summon another Dark Lord, and you can go off like that. Superbia is not once per turn as well, so keep that in mind. You can summon Superbia multiple times in a turn and get multiple additional summons. Theater of the Branded, you guys have probably seen this before, but it's just a very powerful fusion-based field spell. It lets you fusion summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your extra deck, which all of mine are. using monsters from your hand or field as material. And if a face-up, non-fusion fairy monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, they're all fairies, you can target a level 8 or higher fusion monster, which is all of the fusions, in the graveyard, special summon it. So it's got a lot of recursion. Also, Caritas, if it gets destroyed, you can summon a Despian, which guarantees that you can sort of recycle trigger off of Theater of the Branded. It's definitely a top threat, and they will attempt to remove this when at all possible. Outside of that, we also have 2 super polys. If you run 3, you risk bricking, but 2 are pretty decent because we do have some super poly targets, and need be, I can also summon a fairy to their field using Indulge Darklord and use it for a fusion summon. 2 called by, that's the only quote hand trap that's not an archetype that we have. It's just helps you to deal with things like Ash Blossom, which can completely destroy you if you're not careful. Branded opening, very easy. You run 2 of to search out a Luber usually, or one of the others if you need it, one of the other Despians. But also when it's in grave, it protects fusion cards, so it's good. Branded in red, target a Despian monster in the graveyard, add it to the hand, then you fusion summon by banishing fusion materials mentioned on it from your hand or your field. So this is why I run Guardian Chimera at 1, is for that rare case. It very rarely comes up. Most likely, to be honest, you'll see me go into another fusion before that, but worst case scenario, it can help you pop problematic cards, floodgates, and that type of thing on the field. Then we have 1 singular copy of Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Most of our fairies are 2500 or more attack that are dark, okay? So I can set this, chain first Darklord to special summon one of them, pop, special summon one of them, activate Epidemic, pop them for the effect, declare whatever type that they're playing. You can sort of get a feel on what someone's playing after the first monster is played, etc. And then sometimes they'll scoop there, or other times it'll just give you enough gas to get going, because it takes a little bit of time for Darklords to fully get rolling. Darklord Rebellion, you usually don't set and activate this. You will activate it from grave by paying 1000 life points with one of the Darklord effects, like Ixchel. But it is destroy 1 card on the field. This is non-targeting destruction. It can be spell, trap, monster, whatever. Non-targeting destruction. And when you activate it off of a creature, it just sends it back to the deck, and so you would have to summon Ukobach to send it back to the grave again. Just so something to keep in mind. I already mentioned this. This is a searchable, essentially our 3rd copy of Super Poly, but this one allows me to target a fusion or a Despian in my graveyard, special summon it, and then fusion summon using cards on either side. So say Dramaturge has been removed, I can target Dramaturge, special summon Dramaturge, and then fusion summon using Dramaturge in their field, and then Dramaturge, even though this card banishes, Dramaturge will special summon from being banished because it was used as fusion material. So it works really well as a 1-of in this build. So now let's move on to the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we have Starving Venom, Super Poly target, 2 darks on the field. Dark is the most common type in Yu-Gi-Oh! Makes sense. Ours are as well if we needed to use it to get out of something. Predaplant Dragostapelia. We are running many fusions, so we can always supply the fusion monster in most cases, or lucky scenarios, they start fusion summoning or go DPE. I can remove it very easily with Super Poly, DPE, and one of our many dark monsters on the field. Very easy. Also, of course, it has a targeted negate. Caritas, we run a 2-of. So Caritas, quick effect, change the attack of all monsters on the field to 0 except for level 8 or higher fusions. So it will set our fairies down to 0, but most of our cards on the field will be fusions. And if they are fairies, they're likely in defense if it's during the opponent's turn, so I'm not too worried about it. Also, it has recursion by being able to summon a Despian monster from my deck. Then Masquerade is a tech that I will usually not initially summon, but I will go into it with Banishment or Branded in Red if I see that they're going to be a combo deck that is going to summon or chain a million effects. So if I see Dragon Link, if I see Adagnister or Sprites especially, I will shotgun into this so that they burn heavily for each card they activate. Chimera I already went into, it's just a 1-of tech. Proskinian doesn't always come out, but it can be summoned using Branded Banishment as long as they have a light on the field, or maybe you have a Despian and a Dark and they have a light, you can use Branded Banishment to get rid of all of them. Summon Proskinian, and then Proskinian can then proceed to steal Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link monsters in their graveyard, or just banish it if it's a problem. Also, when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, inflict damage to their life points equal to the attack or defense of the monster, whichever is higher. So, it's just a good 1-of. I don't always go into it, but it's very beefy, and it does have some really good effects. Keep in mind, this one is a fiend, so it is not protected from targeting if you happen to have it out with the first Darklord. Let's actually go through all the fusions. So, as you notice, we have Dragon, Plant, Fiend, Dragon. Actually, oops, sorry, I thought that was Dragon. Fiend, Beast, Fiend. So, the only Fairy fusion we have is the first Darklord, so it will protect itself and all of the monsters on the field, but it will not protect the other fusions, so just keep that in mind. The first Darklord we run a 2-of, 4K, that's beefy as frick. Also, if it's fusion summoned using Darklord Morningstar, board wipes, you can only use one of the 2 effects per turn, so if you do the board wipe, you will not also be able to pay 1,000 life points, special summon a fairy from hand or grave, so it's either or. You usually are only going to want to use the prior if their board is oppressive, or say they set 5 past, then you will probably do it. But other than that, it's not likely. Okay, now for our Xyz cards, we run 1 Numeron Dragon for OTK. We run 1 Hope Harbinger, and then we run 1 Dragublion. So, Dragublion is what you use to get into Numeron Dragon for the OTK. That's the purpose of it there. But if I know I'm going to need to go into Hope Harbinger, I will also use that line to go Dragublion into Hope, so that way I have another body on field to use with, say, IP Masquerena. But Hope Harbinger is when a spell card or a spell effect is activated on the field, quick effect, negate it. Also, I can make them attack Titanic Galaxy instead of another card that's weaker. So that's the benefit of that one. For our links, we run a Condemned Darklord, and so this one, it lets you tribute fairy monsters that require 2 tributes by banishing 2 monsters from your graveyard instead of tributing. So this can be useful to get out Darklord Morningstar in a tricky situation when your board is really weak or been blown out. So it's a good card to have on hand. Also, say you drew something that was a brick that you will not get any use out of, say a Called By, and you are dead in the water. You can, let me show you on here, to discard a card, take a Darklord monster from your deck, and add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. So I can add one of the Darklords to hand, like I could run Indulged, chain that off, and essentially start to unbrick myself, those are good effects. And then also it has a static effect, which is once per turn during my end phase, I get 500 life points for each fairy on the field. Usually I will have her out in 9 times out of 10. IP Masquerena, I will also end with her on the field by sacking some of the fairies that I resummoned with the first Darklord. And during my opponent's phase, quick effect, you can link summon monsters, 1 monster using materials you control, including this card. And it provides destruction protection from card effects. So the reason that's in there is to go into Underworld Goddess, which has 1 card effect that special summons from the graveyard, a negation of that activation, and also when it hits the field, it essentially board negates, which is pretty beefy, and I've used that to blow up boards before. So essentially I will go IP Masquerena, using her, 2 random fairies that I will summon off the first Darklord, and 1 problematic card that I absolutely need to get rid of, Avermax, etc., for Underworld Goddess. So it's a pretty balanced deck build currently. I've been playing with it for a long time. The only things I would say are adjustable to taste would be Reasoning, can be adjusted for another allure, for another fairy, or another trap. Or, in the extra deck, I would say the optional tweaks, you could remove Chimera, you could run another Xyz, you could run Mud Dragon instead of Chimera. There's just some tweaks there that you can make. But otherwise, it's pretty sound and it works pretty well. I hope you guys enjoyed the deck breakdown, and in the next video, I'll showcase some of the key combos associated with this deck. Thanks for watching, see you guys next time.